When you start programming, you should be familiar with debugging tools. These tools are available for different programming languages. So for Python itself, you have tools like Visual Studio Code or PyCharm and other tools. For you to be a proficient programmer, get familiar with these programming tools. I'll show you how to start with debugging. Let's move to Visual Studio Code. Let's talk a little bit about debugging and testing. If you are a beginner, when you start writing bigger programs, most of the time you must be using an online Python interpreter, and that's good enough for you to be familiar with data structures to write short programs. But when you write more programs, they become more complicated, and definitely you will have some errors and then you will have to debug them. So let's start with Visual Studio Code. And Visual Studio Code is very good for you to debug your programs. I'm going to show you how to debug a Python program using Visual Studio Code. So let's write a small programs. So I'm just going to write a list and then I want to just print it. So here you can see that it's showing some errors here. So view the problem. So you can also view what is the problem. So it says unexpected indentation. So we know that this is not indented correctly. Python wants this indentation should start from the first line. And did that error go away? Yeah, that error went away in that particular line. And second line shows another program, and that is obviously related to the indentation. So let's correct it. Yeah. So now you can see there is no markings in red here. That means there is no syntax error in this program. Now we can run it. Yeah, so we got the values correctly. So to find these issues which are syntactic, IDE like Visual Studio Code will help you. It will show you in red if there is any syntax error with your program. If you have syntax error, then you will not be able to run your program at all. Now, syntax errors are easy to fix, and once you are familiar with programming, it is very easy for you to go and fix the syntax errors. But the issue is with semantic errors, and semantics errors are the ones which causes your program not to work correctly. So let's look at a program where I'm just going to show you the power of this IDE. Let's add two more elements like 4 and 5 to this list. So we know that append function will add elements 4 and 5 to this list. So I added 4 and 5. And there is no syntax errors, so it should work correctly. So let's print the new list. Printing the new list one. So it's always good to print like this, new list. And let's run it. So it says that append takes exactly one argument only. So, but we have given 2 arguments. So that means there is something wrong again. There was no syntax error, but the interpreter didn't know what to do with it. This is called a semantic error, where syntactically this was correct, but semantically the interpreter didn't know what to do with your second program. So let's try to correct it. So now the new list is getting printed, but as we know, the append takes just one argument. So 4 and 5 was another argument. It's a new list, and that list got added as the 4th element in our new list. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to add 4 and 5 as separate elements. So we know the append will not work. So let's try this function called list1. And also when you just press here, you can also see what are the list functions available, right? So it would tell you that the list functions are every Python data structure is an object and it has attributes corresponding to it, and also it has methods within it. So these are the methods. So the list has append, clear, copy, etc. So what we want is we want to use now extend, list1.extend, and let's add 4 and 5. Let's print the new list. See, now this is working correctly. So this is how you can make use of print statements, and you can make use of the features provided by the IDE to write longer programs correctly. Now let's write a new program where what we want to do is we have a list and we want to pick the first, third, fifth, etc. elements and create a new list. So let's start with 4, 5, 6, 7. So we in the new list, what should our new list looks like? Should look like 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Okay. So for this, we know, okay, so here it's showing an error. That means I'm not given. Here again there is an error. My indentation is not correct. So how do I check if this is working correctly? So the new list, so this new list should be same as our, I'm just adding every element to this new list. So what do I expect? Okay, so what is this issue now? So there is an issue and it says it's not defined. That means I've not initialized it. I'm correcting this indentation error as well. So now all the errors have vanished. So now this should work. Let's run this. So the new list is, it's not the same, it's the same as our old list. So we got all the numbers, but this is not what we want. What we want is we just want the 1, 3, 5, 7, etc. So for that, maybe we can initialize a counter to check if this number is odd or even. So to check if the number is odd or even, there is this modulo function, and if this modulo is equal to 0, then we can say that this is even number. If it's even, we don't want to do anything, but if it is not even, we want to add this element. Okay, so what did we do here? If the number is even, we are just printing that this number is even. If it is not even, that means it's odd, and then we are adding the member to this new list. So let's run it. And do this program along with me so that you are familiar with what I'm talking about, and then you know what we are doing here. So here again the new list is the same as the old list, so nothing has happened. So what's wrong? So to check what is wrong, we don't know what's happening to this. So counter, so let's print counter, okay? Because we don't know why this counter is not, it's not giving the right value. So let's see what's going wrong. See, counter is always 1. So this is the way for you to debug. So this kind of issues you will always find in your program. Though you have everything in a loop, you should have incremented your counter, which is not done. So let's now increment the counter. So I incremented the counter. So let's run this program again. So the final list is still 1. We still didn't get the actual value. Now the counter is showing always, the counter is 1, then counter got incremented to 2, and in all the other instances the counter is 2. So again, let's see what's going wrong. This is how you should debug a program. The counter is 2. So now we notice that the counter is incremented in our else statement. That means only if it is not even, it gets incremented, right? And first time it is 1, and second time the counter became 2, but then from there onwards it never comes into this else statement, right? So counter is always 2. So the issue was that we incremented this counter in this else statement. Let's bring it out. So the counter should have been incremented outside this if else conditions, right? It should have been within this for statement. Now let's run it. See, now we got our program correctly. So we got counter is getting incremented. This is the output. Counter is getting incremented to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And we got our program correctly. So 1, 3, 5, 7, that's what we expected. So new list. Okay, if it is 9, what happens? Yeah. So when you have 9 elements in the list, we got it correctly. So this is one way for you to debug the problem. You give your print statement and you keep checking for your parameters and then see what's happening. Now this is not always very easy because every time you have to introduce print statements in between. The other alternate method is to use source code editors or the integrated development environments like the Visual Code to debug your programs easier. So that's another topic. We'll talk about it in another session.